the Prairie Farm Podcast, presented by Hoxie Native Seeds. I'm Nicholas. This is Kent.
I'm Kent.
And today we are joined by one of the most incredible people I've ever met in many, many ways. I don't know. I can't even begin to describe it. One time he was a freshman and someone bet him $50 if he wore the same pair of shoes throughout all of high school and didn't cut his hair. And he won $50 at the end of high school. So that's the kind of man.
4 years.
That's the kind of man this guy is.
It was worth it.
Paul Attema, everybody. Paul, why don't you tell him hi?
Hello. It's nice to meet everybody.
Man, thanks so much.
I feel like we have a real legend. I mean, when we interviewed Carol, we truly had a legend on the other end of this table. But a dude that is willing to wear his shoes, the same pair of shoes. Now, was there any breaks in between, like, you go to church or something or a wedding? Did you?
I would wear them to the church and the wedding as well.
Ooh,
it wasn't even because of the bet. It was just because they were a good pair of shoes. They were worn in. They were comfortable.
So did your feet grow within those 4 years?
My feet didn't grow, but the shoes did kind of start popping out, So my feet were hanging out of the shoes.
How much duct tape did you have by the end of the...
I found duct tape doesn't actually work for repairing shoes. It's more of a hindrance, so you just kind of let them fall apart.
Wow.
And
so you just let them flap around?
Yeah. Well, this is a good pair of shoes. So they got holes in the side, but they never actually, the main heel part didn't come off of the shoe.
Never lost their soul.
Yes.
Man, that'll preach. That'll preach. Go for it, okay? And well, the reason I had Paul on today was because we focus a lot on prairie conservation, hunting, anything outdoors, and conservation. Am I missing anything?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. It probably covers most of our listeners as well. They're probably interested because of one or multiple of those avenues.
Yeah. And
is Kent a gardener?
Kent, how good are you at gardening?
Well, you know what? I do have a garden at my house. I can take no credit for that garden. Other than I did, I got to word this carefully. I did spread some interesting fertilizer on that garden recently. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, that's a place to leave it for sure.
That's been my only contribution thus far. We do not use human excrement.
Oh, okay. That was my next question.
Yeah.
No,
that's far more interesting.
That's what I was wondering. I was like, man, dude, Kent pooped in a bucket and he spread it in his garden. You just know
that violates health code.
Is this fertilizer legal?
It is legal. It's just very uncommon here in Iowa.
Okay.
I kind of feel like I need to say what it is now. It was bear blood.
Wow.
BEAR blood.
Bear blood.
And that's a product, or that's...
It was real black bear blood. Montana black bear.
He killed a bear with his bare hands.
No.
He went in with a knife and just freaking killed that bear. Tell him about the story.
It was not with my bare hands. And technically, I didn't kill it. I did butcher it, though. My hunting partner, I missed my shot opportunity, and then naturally it's his turn the next time we see a bear. So he was the one that got the bear.
And did you take the blood from this bear?
Yes, and I fertilized my garden with it.
How does that process work?
Why are you so interested? There are no bears in Iowa.
Well, I figure you can use, possum blood or whatever,
Well,
or is it specifically black bear
blood? We could really get into a very deep philosophical conversation here, because black bears were not only native but prevalent here in Iowa. And
I did not know that.
I'm going to make my prediction right now. This will be forever on record, because of this podcast is going to last forever, because Nicholas is going to live forever. But I think black bears are going to have a reestablished population in Iowa by the time, I'm retirement age.
Okay, I want to play off of that, because what do black bears need to come back to Iowa?
They need habitat, and we have it. And we need people to be tolerant. The reason black bears aren't here anymore, during the timeline when Iowa was being settled, people coming here, there wasn't general stores or grocery stores around every corner. People had to live off the land to literally survive through the winter, and they basically wiped out all game that we had here in Iowa, and black bears were one of the fairly early species to go. And
they've got so much fat and meat and
and
fur. They're
an ideal food source,
Yeah.
And running up a tree is a really great survival skill when you're running from maybe wolves or, mountain lions, other predators that would have been after them as, bear cubs, really, when they were that instinct that they learn. But run up a tree against somebody who's got a gun or something like that, not so much a great defense skill. So they're probably fairly easy pickings for early settlers. But I really do think that, northeastern Iowa, where we have some of that vast forest left, I really think, every year we're seeing them come into the state. We've had 2, I believe, already recorded in Iowa this spring, kind of wandering down from up north. So I think it'd be pretty cool to see them back.
What do you think they would? So what kind of habitat do they need?
Definitely do best in a forested area. What's interesting is when you look historically at what Iowa would have been with so much prairie habitat, how did they use that prairie? I just can't really picture them as much of a grassland animal. So my guess is their distribution would have probably been the, river bottom type ground like Mississippi and Missouri River. And then of course up north. And I think we did have some fairly decent timber stands down in southwest Iowa as well and southeast Iowa. But I don't know about around here how many we would have, but there are records, I know, in Mahaska County of settlers, journaling about killing a bear. It's pretty cool stuff when you look into it.
Well, that brings us full circle because Paul not only has started his own business, his own landscaping and tree stump business, has not only worked at the Capitol here in Iowa and knows a lot about politics. So not only worked at the Capitol, not only drove bus for a while, not only starting a family. How old were you when you had your first kid?
21.
21.
Awesome.
Man, he was getting life started early. Not only wrote a book about the Constitution.
No, don't talk about it.
When he was 17? How old were you? You were 17?
I'm not very proud of it, but yes,
Look,
I was
no
17.
One's proud of anything that they did when they were 17.
That's true.
But he worked for the DNR for a while and really likes trees.
I do really like trees.
Well,
and I worked in the forestry division of the DNR, so it was a
That's
perfect fit.
awesome.
What'd you do?
I did insect trapping. So my brothers made fun of me because we would use, I don't even know what, sex pheromones or whatever to attract insects. And we were trying to see if walnut twig beetle, which is a beetle that infects walnut trees and kills them, and then gypsy moth. Those were the 2 main things we were trapping. So
Wow. Why? What were you trapping them for?
just to monitor whether they're in the state. So gypsy moths, there's a few in the state. I don't think there's not a lot of them. And the twig beetle hasn't been found in the state, but it would harm what little forestry or like lumber industry, I guess, there is in the state. So, because walnut's like the most.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think they call them like fly-by-night lumber companies. They'll call you up and be like, hey, we noticed you got a stand of walnut trees there in your little timber back behind, the back end of your farm. Could we come in and log that? And that's happened on the farm ground that my family owns, that both on my mom's side and my dad's side, both of them have had companies like that come and buy walnut trees off of them.
And it's not a small deal, the lack of forestry in Iowa. I mean, people joke about it being like flat and prairie waves, but we had a lot of trees here for a while.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, farming started to happen, but then again in the 80s when corn hit $3, and then there was no trees to be found anywhere. But something about Paul that he has a really interesting mind is you pay a lot of attention to macro and microeconomics. So you pay attention like what like businesses are spending their money on and what people want around you. And I'm curious from that point of view, what would it take to healthily bring back forest or bring back vegetation for those things that we really don't have anymore, if that makes sense?
Well, I guess right now there's resources. So if somebody wants to reforest a plot of ground that would historically, I guess, would have been trees, the State Forest Nursery is a great resource. You can buy seedlings of a lot of different varieties for pretty much $1 a piece. And they have shrubs and trees and, how to encourage people to do that, I guess. I know there's a really good CRP program and stuff, and there's encouraging people to plant CRP and prairie and wetlands and stuff. But I know the wetlands program in particular, you're not supposed to have trees on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the area that historically was forested might be, it's placed in wetlands, and then any tree that would grow, they cut down because otherwise it wouldn't qualify for the program. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Well, even with like putting in prairie grasses, the idea there is you're helping upland bird population, which is another interesting topic. It's fun to have a conservation themed show here in Iowa because Iowa is such an interesting place for conservation issues. But with a prairie plot, a lot of times you don't want trees mixed in with your prairie because raptors, predatory birds, will use that as their vantage point for picking off bobwhite quail, pheasants, any other ground nesting bird, turkeys even. They could come down and really hammer those bird populations. And so you'll even hear biologists recommend get rid of trees in an area that's largely prairie as well for that very reason.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that with conservation in Iowa in particular, it's kind of where a lot of people, when they think of conservation, they think of like big mines or like cities coming in or like, highways ruining stuff. But Iowa is, this is word of mouth. I haven't fact checked this. I've been told that Iowa is the most terraformed place ever for its size. There's never been a place that's had more terraforming happen, where, for anyone who doesn't know, is where the ground is ripped up and it is put in something not natural, like concrete. So cities are terraformed, or for our instance, it's corn and soybeans, right? 97 point something % of the state is not natural, and most of that 3% that's left over is water and anything around water. Those are kind of what's left of what's natural, and there's just a few acres here and there that's native prairie, and that's it.
And even looking at a lot of our waterways, they were channelized back, early 20th century. People would get their dozers out and their excavators, and they'd jerk streams straight because it was easier to farm around. And so even ground like that along waterways has been manipulated. And I've heard a similar statement to what Nick just mentioned there. A friend of mine was reading a book. I can't remember the name of it. I think might just be titled Food. But there was a statement he told me about that was surprising within that said Iowa is just as manipulated of a surface, right? Surface of the earth has been changed from its original form to the extent of Manhattan Island.
Wow.
And like Nicholas was saying, you don't really think of that here in Iowa. You think of a very rural area where people yawn while they drive down Interstate 80 to get to either side of it, and they think nothing is here. But it's very much industrialized through agriculture.
Yeah, and when you think agriculture, you think like land, earth, more natural. But we need agriculture. I'm not hating on anyone doing agriculture, but there's limits to what you can do and how much you can farm a land before the soil starts taking a beating. But a little bit of a turn from like food sourced agriculture with the trees, where we lack a bunch. We also have a bunch of trees that aren't native, right? Is there like invasive? Did you guys deal with that at all at the DNR, where like invasive species were coming in of trees, or was that not as big of a issue?
It wasn't like the main focus. We focused more on the insects that were like attacking native trees. But the gypsy moth in particular, like tree of heaven, I think it's also called Chinese sumac. Okay. And that's a really invasive tree that's from the same place as gypsy moths. And so gypsy moths really like it. And that's actually a way they trap gypsy moth, I guess, is there's some way to kill the tree and kill the insects on it, and that's how they target gypsy moth in areas where gypsy moth is kind of prolific.
So wait, what's the issue with gypsy moths being in Iowa?
They're just like a stressor on trees, and so they can lead to trees dying. So
man.
And in the forestry division, like the ash borer was the big thing, which they weren't able to control. And so I think they're just trying to monitor for future pests and let people know ahead of time what's coming. Maybe don't plant maples everywhere because like Asian longhorn beetle, we didn't specifically monitor for that, but that could be devastating to maple trees if it comes to Iowa. And it seems like everywhere I go as a landscaper, people have an ash tree taken down, you cut it down, you grind the stump, and then they replace it with a maple tree. And so it could literally be the same thing happening over again. But
yeah, well, he's right. There's a good lesson there, as far as when and maybe it's just human nature because it's easier, right, to shift to monoculture models. What makes me money? What's easy to do? I'll replace ash trees with maple trees. We kind of set ourselves up for the perpetuated problem of that vulnerability there. So that's a good point. And he's right too about the emerald ash borer is just decimated ash trees here in Iowa. So it's good to. I hadn't heard it. I had known about the gypsy moth presence and alarm that it's raised, but it's good to hear that it hasn't really taken off in Iowa. Too bad.
I probably I was supposed to set a trap I don't know if it was every square mile or something like that, but that was in Polk County, and then I set a bunch in Story County and Dallas County and a few counties surrounding it. So I probably set 2,000 traps or something like that, and I caught one gypsy moth out of the whole summer.
Really?
Wow.
So it was a really boring summer looking through all the traps.
Well, that's a good boring.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you were paid.
Well, it's monitor work, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard, and the same way with the twig beetle. And the twig beetles are even smaller, and they're like a type of ambrosia beetle. And so there's ambrosia beetles that are native to Iowa. And so I'd be picking through, and I'd be like, oh, I found one. And then I'd send it to my boss. He's like, oh, no, it's this type of ambrosia beetle. And it's like, I just want to find one. But I don't want to find one.
Wait a minute.
You're just
Yeah,
picking
exactly.
through live beetles, or they're all dead, or?
They're all dead, yeah.
Oh man, you ever find a live do you ever have like a clump of live insects just like crawling around you, or?
No, there was some sort of chemical we used to kill them. There was like the sex chemical that brought them in, and then there's the chemical that killed them.
Wow.
And so it was just a bunch of dead insects, and it wasn't the greatest smell, but it still lives in my memory today.
Oh,
so
man, haunts you.
every time you'd open like one of the Ziploc bags you were supposed to put them in.
Man, do you feel like the trees, you feel like the trees and the lack of trees or the invasive trees, do you feel like that affects our water at all? I know Iowa water is like a thing. People talk about it, and it's pretty low quality. Have you learned of any like correlation between trees and water?
I don't know. I think trees along waterways is kind of controversial because they stabilize it in a way, but then they can also cause erosion. I don't know about the connection between waterways and water quality in trees. Yeah. I know they hold a lot of water. Yeah. And so they're supposed to be good for flooding, but then they're also supposed to be bad for flooding because then so they're kind of like a weird thing. But
and trees are weird if you think about it. They're just like a big plant that is stiffer than anything else on this earth except for rocks. There's just such a weird thing to think. The other day I saw, it was on social media, so I don't know how real this was, but it seemed real. It was this giant vase that this old man had planted some sort of spiderwort in the 70s. No, in the 60s. He watered it once in 1972, and ever since then he's never opened it, and it keeps growing back. It keeps doing its cycle, which is incredible to me. That is so wild. And I don't know if he has any like stratification, like cold stratification or anything like that, but it was so interesting to me to think like, wow, the little ecosystem inside of here.
Yeah.
Just thinking that because of how freaking weird trees are.
Well, we'll get to this at some point. In fact, Nicholas and I are heading north to talk to some guys from Pheasants Forever, and people can kind of criticize. There are a few. So we're talking about invasive species here. Another term, a nicer term, a less sci-fi horror movie sounding term, is non-native, right? And pheasants. Our logo here at Hoxie. There are non-native species. They're not just Iowa, to all of North America. But why do we allow them to stick around? And the answer to that is really found in everything we've said so far, because our landscape has been so modified that what can make it here, why not let it be here? Because a lot of the native species that were here instead of the pheasant, the prairie chicken, bobwhite quail, some of these not a ground nesting bird by any means, but it was another bird species, I'm sure, eating a lot of the same things. The passenger pigeon, if those things are gone, bobwhite quail are still here, but not quite to the level that they once were, not too far off. But why not let some of those things stay here? Because an ecosystem is so delicately balanced. And like the example, I haven't seen that video that you're just talking about, but nature can kind of work itself out and find this balance. And Iowa is so far off balance. So what's interesting is, like, I haven't seen the video that you mentioned with the spiderwort growing in the vase, but what it sounds like from very second, I guess, third person, because he'd be the first person, you're the second person, I'm the third person. But from a third person point of view, who's never even had a view to take a point of, or however you'd say that, it sounds like probably some kind of natural balance was established within there, kind of almost like a little micro ecosystem. But then when you look at a place like Iowa, where we still insist on having very much so a man-made influence on how things work, where what natural balance can really be reestablished, in that type of a setup. So it does get kind of interesting when you look at how invasive species, ones that we don't want here, play in. So that's where Paul had his job. And then how does it work then for things that we do want here, like the ringneck pheasant? And I think it's a pretty interesting study to consider, but also not looking so much in the past all the time, but looking towards the future. Well, what do we want Iowa to be eventually, if we could wave a magic wand of conservation and establish something here? What would that look like?
Yeah, and I think that as we are moving forward, right, because we probably will never get exactly what the past was, but we can create a future, right? We can't always save everything in the past, but we're moving forward. We can create what we have going forward, and I think that takes intentionality, and I think it takes people doing their part. And another one of the reasons I wanted to have Paul on today is because Paul, this dude does his part, but like on his level. He's not out trying to change U.S. Congress's mind. He has this yard. I'm just gonna hand it over to Paul. Paul, tell us about what you got going on in your yard. Be as detailed as
start
you
from the front to the back. Or?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I live kind of by the stadium, and so that's kind of
What stadium?
Jack Trice Stadium. So
Iowa
go
State.
Cyclones.
Okay.
And so for a long time, I just used it as a grass lot during game days to park cars, and I still do that with what's left. But I was never allowed to park cars on the front yard, so I made a little apple orchard up there. So I got 3 apple trees, and then also some raspberry bushes. And then moving to the back, I got my chicken coop, which is the most important, and my 12 lovely ladies live there. And then I have I don't know. I'm just going to sound white trash, but I swear I'm not. I have an old trailer that the frame broke, and it was an enclosed trailer, so I converted that to a shed for my equipment.
Oh, there you go.
And then I have, when I started doing stump grinding, I kind of made a pledge, I want to plant a tree for every stump I remove. So I made a small nursery of seedlings, and that takes up about, I don't know, maybe a quarter of my backyard. So
very nice.
So what do you do with your seedlings? Because you're not growing them all in your backyard. I mean, like, you're not planting them all there.
Oh, no, they're all in buckets. So I sell them to customers. I offer them at a discount to my customers, and then I also just post them on Facebook and sell them that way. So
Man,
very nice.
there was also one time I was riding with Paul. We were going somewhere in Tennessee from Iowa, and we decided to take a 2-hour detour so that Paul could stop in Illinois to buy rain barrels. So we drug a trailer all the way to Tennessee and back so we could pick up like 50 rain barrels. What'd you do with it? you have them in your basement or something now, or
Yeah, well, I got rid of a lot of them, so now you can
you
actually
sold them all?
not
Or
all of
a
them,
bunch
no,
of them?
a bunch of them. So now you can walk through my basement, which is a nice feature to have. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I offer them to my customers, and there's kind of a culture in Ames and Des Moines of like urban conservation, and so
Love it.
That's
rain
awesome.
barrels and native shrubs and prairie plants and stuff like that. It all kind of fits together, and urban agriculture too, to a certain extent.
So-
People gardening.
Why do you use your whole yard? Why don't you have any lawn?
I mean, it's just not useful. It doesn't make me money.
Yeah, mowing lawns
And mowing, I mean,
costs money.
Do you even own a mower?
I own a mower. It's not self-propelled, and it takes me about 7 to 8 minutes to mow if I'm going really slowly.
That's the way to do it.
Rough.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
But I do have to maintain a little bit of lawn for my ladies.
Oh,
They like to they like to graze. Yeah, I let them free range when they've been good. So
Yeah, I had a question for you on that. So I don't own any chickens yet. We're still new to our little farmstead that we moved on to, but that's coming soon.
Mhm.
In fact, I got to tear down a shed after raspberry season's over because I have all these raspberry bushes growing around this collapsing shed, and I don't want to lose this year's crop to the collateral, right? But the collateral damage there. But the big problem for chicken owners is predation, right? So what kind of urban predation do you have to worry about for your 12 lovely ladies?
well, they're usually in their pen unless if we're out doing something in the yard and then we let them out. But yeah, it is a big problem. We put up bird netting on the top of the pen just to keep hawks and owls and stuff like that out. And we live right by a creek, so we do have a lot of predators. I mean, I've seen foxes walking on both sides of my 0.19 acre plot of ground.
Hey, that's a lot of ground there in an urban area.
Yeah. Or no. Sorry, did I say 1.9? I said 0.19.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
0.19.
0.19. Yeah. So less than a fifth of an acre.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying you almost had an acre there.
Oh no, that'd be great. But no, there's a lot of foxes. I've seen quite a bit of coyotes and stuff, and so we just we don't let them out of their pen unless if we're out with them.
Unless you're watching them. What do
Yeah.
they do?
They just they peck at each other and peck at the ground. And
Do you
they're
watch
kinda-
the pecking order? Do you know what it is? Could you be like,
Yeah, well, we knew who was on top. We got a variety of different breeds, and they're like dogs. There's the pit bull of chickens, and there's the golden retriever of chickens and stuff. Do not get a leghorn. They're so aggressive, and we got this leghorn, and we got a few ducks too. And there's the one duck that was bow-legged, and the leghorn just beat up on this thing, like defeathered the entire back, and like about killed this poor duck just because he was at the top of the pecking order. And I guess you're supposed to get rid of the weak link for the good of the flock.
There you go. There's our hashtag for today, for the good of the flock.
Oh man.
I think that's awesome that you're buying into that urban agriculture, urban conservation model, because I think people have seen that's where a lot of traction can be gained, right? We talked about it earlier. Ag is so critically important to human civilization, and especially how we do modern living. In most places, the model that we have for ag right now suits it well, but it does not suit conservation very well in a lot of different ways, unfortunately. But people are realizing, hey, if I live in town, I got this yard that just costs me money. I got to pay property taxes on it. I got to mow it, and mowing takes time as well. And you know what? Maybe I could actually find, in your case, you have found a way to turn a profit on your yard, or just maybe even be more conservation minded with, maybe, I know there's in some urban areas some really strong urban pollinator outfits and organizations that people can belong to. And, people are starting to see that there's value even in some of the most unexpected areas.
Yeah, that's real. That'll preach. I think it's starting to rain, and Paul's loveliest lady and his son are outside.
Probably taking
hanging
shelter in
out.
the truck.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, it's just great getting to meet you, Paul. This is good stuff. We got to have you back on the show. I think the Hoxie YouTube channel needs to make a trip up to
See Paul.
see Paul.
Man,
See the
maybe
backyard operation.
Dude, Paul, you could be like a young Uncle Si. You know, Uncle Si from Duck Dynasty, but you'd be like a young version here on the farm. You come work on the farm and just doing crazy crap all the time.
We'll come out the day of the Cy-Hawk game.
Oh, yes.
Which I think is that's in Iowa City this year, I think, isn't it?
The Cy-Hoxie native seeds.
There we
All
go.
right. I think
we'll go there during that game. We'll see how Paul makes money off of parking cars in the front yard under the apple tree. Allows a U-pick apple service to the people that are parking.
They're about a quarter size right now.
And then sends them home with an egg and a little tree sapling as well.
Wow. The inspiring conservation at its finest. Man, that's so cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. This has been the Prairie Farm Podcast presented by Hoxie Native Seeds. And remember, conservation, as Paul has shown, is done 1 yard at a time. Thanks for joining. Say bye, Paul.
Goodbye.